There is a small brown bottle sitting in your bathroom right now. Cost you about $1, maybe less. Down in the kitchen, there's a box of Epsom salt for your sore feet, $2. Put those two together and you hold in your hands what the garden center has been charging your neighbors $40 and $50 for every single spring. In a bright bag with a happy picture of a tomato on the front. We never once bought that bag. Not my father, not his father before him. My people have grown food on the same ground in Lancaster County for more than 100 years, and there was never a sack of colored powder in the barn. There was a pump, a jug, and knowledge that got handed down at the kitchen table. Here is the bold truth I want you to sit with. That $2 mix does the one thing the expensive fertilizer only pretends to do. It feeds the part of the plant that is actually starving. And the folks who sell the bag have no reason on this earth to tell you that, because a dollar bottle does not keep the lights on at a fertilizer company. Stay with me. Right around the middle of this, I'm going to show you the exact way my grandfather timed this down to the hour of the day that made the difference between a plant that limps along and a plant that doubles. It costs less than a cup of coffee, and almost nobody outside the Plain community still does it. Before we go on, do me a small favor. Drop your state or your growing zone down in the comments. I read them, and it tells me whether I'm talking to somebody fighting Georgia clay or Minnesota frost, because the timing changes a little for each. I still remember the smell of the tin dipper in the well water, standing between the tomato rows behind our barn on a July morning, my grandfather pouring something clear over the roots and telling me, in the plain way, that the plant does not eat the way we think it eats. I was maybe 9 years old. It took me 40 years to understand he was right, and that the whole world had forgotten it. Let me start with the bottle. The hydrogen peroxide. Here is the question almost nobody thinks to ask. Why does a plant sitting in perfectly good, rich, watered soil still turn yellow and sad? You gave it dirt, you gave it water, you gave it sun. So what is it missing? The answer is air. The roots are suffocating. Now, most folks have never once thought about roots needing to breathe, but they do every hour of every day. Roots are not just straws that suck up water. They are living tissue, and living tissue needs oxygen the same way you and I do. When roots cannot get oxygen, they cannot pull up the food that's already sitting right there in the soil. The pantry is full, but the plant can't open the door. This is where your soil turns against you. When you water heavy, or when you've got that thick clay that packs down hard, the water fills up every little pocket in the dirt where air used to be. The roots drown a little at a time. You see it as yellow leaves and slow growth, and you think, well, it must need more fertilizer, so you buy more of the bag, and you pour on more food that the roots are too starved of oxygen to even take up. You are feeding a plant that cannot swallow. Now, look at the little brown bottle. Hydrogen peroxide. The scientists write it as 2 hydrogen and 2 oxygen. Plain water is 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. You see the difference? Peroxide is just water carrying 1 extra atom of oxygen, and that extra atom is held on loose. It wants to let go. When you pour a diluted amount of that peroxide into the soil, it breaks apart almost right away. It turns back into plain water, and it releases that extra oxygen straight down at the root line. You are not adding a chemical. You are adding a breath of air right where the plant is choking for 1. Here's the recipe, and I want you to write it down or pause it. 1 tablespoon of the common 3% hydrogen peroxide, the kind in the brown bottle, into 1 cup of water. Some folks go a bit stronger, up to a tablespoon per 2 cups if the soil is really waterlogged and sour. You pour that at the base, right over the soil, once every week or 2, not every day. You are giving the roots a breath, not a flood. And here is the part the outside world only figured out recently. Researchers looking at seed germination found that a soak in dilute hydrogen peroxide broke the seed's dormancy and got it sprouting faster and stronger, because that burst of oxygen wakes the seed up and helps soften its hard coat. Oregon State and a good number of university trials have shown the oxygen effect on root zones is real, not folklore. The English scientists put it in a paper in the last 20 years or so. My grandfather put it on our tomatoes before 1960. He didn't have the word oxygenation. He just knew the clear water made the roots come alive. But oxygen alone is only half the story. Because a plant that can finally breathe still needs one particular thing to turn green and make its own food, and that is where the box of Epsom salt walks in. Therefore, let's talk about the green itself. Have you ever really looked at why a leaf is green? Not just that it is, but why. The green is a thing called chlorophyll. That's the little factory inside every leaf that catches sunlight and turns it into sugar. That's how the plant feeds itself. That green color is the plant literally cooking its own dinner out of light. And here's the secret hiding in plain sight. At the very center of every single molecule of chlorophyll sits one atom of one mineral, magnesium. Take away the magnesium, and the plant cannot build chlorophyll. No chlorophyll, no green, no sugar, and the plant slowly starves to death while sitting in full sun. It is like giving a man a stove and firewood but no match. Everything's there, but nothing lights. Before we go on, do me a small favor. Drop your state or your growing zone down in the comments. I read them, and it tells me whether I'm talking to somebody fighting Georgia clay or Minnesota frost, because the timing changes a little for each. Now, what is Epsom salt? Read the box. It is magnesium sulfate. It is about 10% pure magnesium and about 13% sulfur, and that's it. Two things. Magnesium, the match that lights the chlorophyll, and sulfur, which the plant uses to build its proteins and, honestly, to make a tomato taste like something. Here's what nobody at the garden center will tell you. Most of those expensive bags are heavy on three things: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The big three. And your soil, in most established yards, already has plenty of those sitting there. What older, worked soil runs short on is exactly the thing they leave out or shortchange, because it's cheap and it doesn't make the plant shoot up fast and look impressive on the shelf. Magnesium, you can see the hunger with your own eyes. When a plant is short on magnesium, the leaf goes yellow between the veins, but the veins themselves stay green. Yellow leaf, green veins, like a green skeleton in a yellow hand. And it always starts on the older, lower leaves first, because the plant, being wiser than we are, robs magnesium out of its old leaves to keep the new ones alive. That's the plant rationing its own food. That yellow with green veins pattern is the plant begging you for exactly what's in that $2 box. The recipe here is just as simple. 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt dissolved in a gallon of water. Stir it till it's clear. Pour it at the base of the plant about once a month during the growing season. For a big tomato or pepper or a rose bush, a tablespoon worked lightly into the soil around the base at planting time, and again when it starts to flower, does the work. And there was real testing on this. The National Gardening Association ran trials on peppers and roses, and the plants given magnesium sulfate came in bushier, greener, with more blooms and more fruit than the ones left without. Tomato and pepper growers have known for generations that these two crops are magnesium hungry above almost all others. My mother grew the reddest tomatoes on the road, and her whole secret was a spoonful of that white salt and a prayer of thanks. She'd have laughed at a $40 bag. So now you see the two halves. The peroxide opens the root's lungs so it can breathe and take up food. The Epsom salt hands it the one mineral it needs to turn that food into green energy. One fixes the door, the other fills the pantry. But when you put them together, something happens that neither one does alone, and that's where this stops being two little tricks and starts being the whole thing the industry replaced with a bag. Think it through. What good is oxygen at the root if there's no magnesium to build the green factory? And what good is magnesium if the root is too drowned in packed, airless soil to pull it up? Each one is a key. Neither key works without the other. That's why the folks who tried just Epsom salt alone sometimes saw nothing, and the folks who tried just peroxide alone saw a little and then quit. They had one key. You need both. When the roots are breathing and the magnesium is flowing, the plant does the rest by itself. It builds chlorophyll. It cooks more sugar. That sugar goes down and feeds the roots, and stronger roots pull up more of everything else already sitting in your soil, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, all of it. You didn't add those. You just unlocked the plant so it could go get them on its own. That right there is why we never needed the bag. We weren't feeding the plant like a baby with a spoon. We were setting the table and letting it feed itself the way the good Lord built it to. Now, let me be plain with you about who profits from you not knowing this, because it matters. There is nothing evil about a bottle of fertilizer, but there is a whole industry, billions of dollars, built on one quiet idea, that your garden is helpless without them. Every spring, the store sets out the pallets, the bright bags, the 4 different kinds for 4 different plants, when it's mostly the same stuff with a different picture. And they have spent a great deal of money teaching 2 generations of Americans that a garden is a thing you buy your way into, season after season, forever. My people were never told that story, so we never believed it. We were poor in money and rich in ground, and we made the ground do the work. And here is the thing that started as a small annoyance, and the more I've looked into it, has become something closer to a quiet anger. It is not that they sold a product, it is that they sold dependence. They didn't just want your $40 this spring. They wanted you to believe you need to come back and hand it over every single spring for the rest of your life, and to teach your children to do the same. That's not selling a tool. That's selling a leash. Now, I know what a good many of you are thinking right about now. This all sounds fine for somebody starting fresh with a new bed and young plants, but you've got an established garden, bushes that have been in the ground 20 years, a lawn your father planted, roses older than your grandkids. You're thinking this is for the young folks starting over, and it's too late for what you've already got. I want to put that worry to rest, because the truth is the exact opposite. This mix does its very best work on old, established, tired ground. Here is why. Before I show you the exact hour and the exact spot my grandfather sprayed, let me stop for one honest minute, because this same thinking goes far beyond one yellow tomato leaf. Here's the truth. The peroxide and the Epsom salt fix the 2 things holding your tomatoes back, but your yard has other bullies. The weeds that come back no matter how many times you pull them. The fire ant mound that just moves 3 feet over. The wasps up under the eaves. And every one of those has the same story as the fertilizer bag. Somebody selling you an expensive fix that only works for a week. I put the whole plain and cheap system down on paper, the way it was handed to me. It's called the Complete Garden Field Edition, and it's an instant download you can have in your hands tonight. The garden blueprint shows you how to kill the top yard threats for the price of a couple bags of nothing, with a weed protocol that kills the root and not just the leaf, and a fire ant answer that actually gets the colony instead of moving the mound. The Harvest Blueprint goes deeper for the serious grower, and the Full Field Edition hands you a 30, 60, 90-day seasonal calendar so you always know what to do and when, plus a quick reference field card you can keep right by the back door. Every bit of it uses household materials that are safe for kids, pets, and your patients. And here's your free test tonight. No book needed. Go look at your lower leaves right now. If you see that yellow between the veins, with the veins still green, that plant is begging for magnesium, exactly like I told you, and 1 spoonful in a gallon of water proves it in 3 weeks. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And the honest reason to grab it now is simple. The growing season is already running, and every week your soil stays packed and hungry is a week of harvest you don't get back. Now, back to that one step my grandfather did that almost nobody outside the plain community still knows. The longer a garden has been in place, the more that soil has packed down over the years, foot by foot, rain by rain, until it's tight as a floor. That's the oxygen problem, worse in an old bed than a new one. And the longer plants have been pulling from the same soil, the more they've drawn the magnesium down low, because nobody was putting it back. Old ground is exactly the ground that's suffocating and starving at the same time. It is the perfect patient for these 2 cheap medicines. So here is what you can do this very weekend, with nothing but what's in your house, on plants you've had for years. Take your watering can, mix in 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt per gallon, stir it clear. Then, right before you pour, add a good splash of the 3% peroxide, about a 1/4 cup to that gallon. Don't mix it up and let it sit for hours. Make it fresh, because the peroxide gives up its oxygen fairly quick, and you want that oxygen going into your soil, not fizzing off into your kitchen. Pour it slow around the base of your established shrubs, your roses, your tomatoes, right out to where the branches reach, because that's where the feeding roots are, not jammed against the trunk. Do that once, then again in 2 weeks. On an old rose bush that's gone all leggy and pale, you'll see the new growth come in a darker green inside of 2-3 weeks. On a tired hydrangea, the leaves firm up. You are not replanting anything. You are not digging anything up. You are waking up roots that have been half asleep for years. And for your lawn, the same idea. A tired old lawn that's gone pale and thin, you can mix Epsom salt at about 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet, put it through a spreader, and water it in. Magnesium greens up a lawn without that surge of fast nitrogen that just makes you mow twice as often. Your grandfather's generation didn't mow a lawn twice a week. Part of the reason is they weren't dumping quick nitrogen on it to force growth. They'd then have to cut off and throw away. There's a foolishness in that when you stop and look at it. Pay to make it grow fast, then pay in sweat to cut off what you paid to grow. But even doing everything I've told you so far, pouring the mix at the roots, there is one more step. And this is the one my grandfather did that I have almost never seen anybody outside the plain communities do. This is the part that separates a good result from the kind of result that makes your neighbor stop his car and ask what on earth you're doing to your tomatoes. This is what I promised you back at the start. The secret is not what you mix. It is where you put it and what hour you do it. Everybody who knows about Epsom salt pours it on the soil. And that works slow, but the fastest way magnesium gets into a plant is not through the roots at all. It's through the leaves. A plant can drink a mineral straight in through the surface of its leaves, and it gets to the green factory in hours instead of days because it skips the whole long trip up from the roots. So you make a lighter mix, not the soil strength. For spraying on leaves, you go gentler, about 1 teaspoon of Epsom salt to a quart of water, fully dissolved, with just a small splash of the peroxide, maybe a tablespoon to that quart. Put it in a hand sprayer, the kind you already own. Now here is the hour that matters, the thing my grandfather knew standing in those rows at first light. You spray it early in the morning, just after dawn, while it's still cool, before the sun climbs up. And here is why, and it's the piece almost nobody understands. A leaf breathes through thousands of tiny mouths on its surface, too small to see, called stomata. And those little mouths are not open all the time. They open in the cool, moist air of early morning, and they close up tight in the heat of the day to keep the plant from drying out. When you spray at noon in the hot sun, those mouths are shut, your spray sits on top and dries into a useless white crust, and most of it burns off or blows away. You wasted it. But spray at dawn, when those thousands of little mouths are wide open, and the leaf drinks it right in. And there is one more turn to it. Most of those little breathing mouths are not on the top of the leaf where you'd think. They're on the underside. So you tip the sprayer up a little and mist the bottoms of the leaves, not just the tops. That is the whole secret. Dawn, cool air, underside of the leaf, light mix. Do that once a week when a plant is flowering and setting fruit and you are feeding it the fast way, the way the shelf products can't touch because they were built to sit in the soil and sell you another bag. The outside world's own science backs every piece of this. University extension work on what they call foliar feeding shows plainly that leaves absorb nutrients best in the early morning and evening when the stomata are open and the air is cool, and that the underside of the leaf, where the stomata are thickest, takes it in far better than the top. They wrote that down as a discovery. My grandfather did it before the sun on a July morning in the 1950s because his father showed him, and his father learned it from a man who never read a page of it anywhere. It was never lost to us. It was just never written in the places the modern world looks. Think about what that means. This was not secret knowledge locked in a vault. It was ordinary knowledge, common as bread, that simply fell out of the world when folks stopped growing their own food and started buying the answer in a bag. The knowledge didn't die. It just went quiet, kept alive at plain kitchen tables and in gardens like the one behind our barn, waiting for somebody to ask again. Now let me give you a few plain cautions, because I'd be a poor neighbor if I handed you a tool and not the sense to use it. More is not better with either of these, and this is where folks get into trouble. The peroxide, keep it diluted the way I said. Full strength peroxide straight from the bottle onto a plant will burn the roots and the leaves, no question. It's the small diluted amount that helps. The little bit fizzes, breathes life into the soil, and turns to plain water. Respect that, and it's one of the gentlest things you can put on a garden. The Epsom salt, don't get greedy either. If your soil already has plenty of magnesium, piling on more can actually get in the way of the plant taking up calcium, and then you've traded one problem for another. This is why I keep telling you to watch the plant. If you see that yellowing between green veins on the lower leaves, that plant is telling you it's hungry for magnesium, and you should feed it. If your plants are dark green and thriving, you don't need to add a thing. We never fed a plant that wasn't asking. That's not just thrift, it's paying attention, and paying attention is most of gardening anyhow. And one honest word, because I won't sell you a miracle the way they sell you a bag. This mix is not magic dust that replaces every last thing your soil could ever want. What it does is fix the two problems that are actually holding most home gardens back: the suffocated root and the missing magnesium, for pennies. Using what you already own, it sets the plant free to feed itself from the good soil you've already got under your feet. On rich, worked ground with a little compost turned in, that is very nearly everything. That's the honest shape of it, and honest is how my people do business. Let me tell you how it comes together over a season, so you can picture your own year. Early spring, when you set out your tomatoes and peppers, a spoonful of Epsom salt worked into each hole at planting. Through the spring, when the ground is wet and cold and packed, the diluted peroxide at the roots every week or two to keep them breathing while the soil warms. Then, when the plants start to flower and set fruit, that's when the demand for magnesium runs highest, and that's when you bring out the dawn spray on the undersides of the leaves once a week. Come high summer, you ease off, watch the plants, and only feed the ones that ask. That's a whole season of feeding for the cost of one small bottle and one box, with plenty left over for next year. Compare that to the treadmill, the bag in spring, the different bag for the tomatoes, the special spike for the roses, the liquid concentrate for the flowers, the weed and feed for the lawn. 4, 5, 6 products, each with its own picture and its own promise, each one $40 or close to it, every single spring, year after year, for as long as you keep a garden. Add that up over 20 years of gardening. It's thousands of dollars for what your great-grandparents did with a dipper of well water and a spoon of salt. And this is the thing I most want you to carry away, deeper than any recipe. Somewhere along the line, the outside world was quietly talked out of believing it could do this itself. Convinced that the ground under its own feet was somehow not enough, that nature needed to be corrected and supplemented and bought back from a store every spring. My people were never sold that idea, so we never lost the plain confidence that a family can feed itself off its own soil with a little knowledge and a little care. That confidence is the thing they really took from your neighbors, not just the $40. The belief that they could. You can take that back this weekend. It's sitting in your bathroom in your kitchen right now, waiting. There's an old habit among my people of not letting a useful thing die just because the world moved on. A skill, a recipe, a way of doing, you pass it to the next hand so it isn't lost. That's really all I'm doing here. Passing what was passed to me, standing in those tomato rows with my grandfather 40-some years back before I understood a word of the why. So here is what I'll ask of you. If you've got a plant that's gone yellow between the veins, or an old bed that's tired, try the mix this weekend, just once. Then come back and tell me what you saw in 2-3 weeks. And do me that favor from the start. Drop your state or your growing zone down in the comments below so I know whether I'm talking to somebody in the deep south or up along the Canadian line, because the timing shifts a little either way. Take the half a minute and actually type it. It helps me, and it helps the next person reading who gardens near you. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, the plain, cheap, honest ways of doing what the world now overcharges for, then come along and subscribe. Not to support me, I do fine, but to be part of a group of folks who are quietly taking this knowledge back, one weekend project at a time. There are more of us than you'd think, and we're growing. And next time, I'm going to show you the one thing my grandmother kept in a coffee can by the back door that kept the bugs off the whole garden without a drop of poison. The recipe every hardware store would rather you never learned. It's even cheaper than this one. I'll be watching the comments for your zone. Go on now, and let that good ground do the work it was always able to do. You just saw the overview. But inside the Amish Field Circle, I take this the whole way, the root line oxygen and magnesium schedule, hour by hour, right where we stopped. And in there you can ask me your own question. A real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel anytime. I'm Eli. Come join me. If this helped your garden, why not subscribe and stay with me? I have plenty more simple, low-cost tips right here, waiting for you whenever you're ready to grow something wonderful.